Okay, so yes, like I said, my name's Dayna Burtness. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and my husband Nick Wynn and I run Nettle Valley Farm, and we're in Spring Grove, Minnesota. So we're about 10 minutes from the Iowa-Minnesota border. So we like to think of ourselves as honorary Iowans. We're happy to be PFI members, and we're really grateful for all the good work that PFI does. I know I've learned a lot over the years from PFI. So it's a picture of our pigs on pasture. I'll tell you a little bit about our farm and our story, and then we'll jump into what we've experienced over the last year with the Incubator Farm program. So that's me on the right. That's me, Dayna, and then my husband Nick is on the left there, and not to be confused with the pigs. Neither of us grew up on farms, so my people, since we got off the boat from Norway, have, at least on my dad's side, have basically always lived in southeastern Minnesota. I'm actually the sixth generation in my farm to farm, or in my family to farm in Houston County. But I didn't, like I said, I didn't actually grow up on a farm. So my story is I grew up sort of a useless suburban kid. I didn't learn how to mow a lawn even until I was 19. So I just share that to let other people know, if you're getting into farming in your 20s or your 30s and you don't have all the skills you need yet, all is not lost. If I can do it, they can do it. My first farm internship when I was 19 was on an organic vegetable farm, and within a couple weeks of farming, I just completely fell in love with the work and the food and the community. And I'm a super impatient person, so I immediately went back to college and tried to start a student farm. And then from there, I took a detour through the nonprofit world in Minneapolis, but then got right back into veggie farming. After starting my first a failed vegetable farming enterprise with actually an investor, and that's a whole nother presentation webinar about why you should be very careful with investors in farming. I started farming at an incubator farm in Northfield, Minnesota, and that's really shaped the generosity and the opportunity that I experienced there to make really dumb, juicy mistakes in a very protected environment has really shaped a lot of my desire to pay it forward now. And Nick has a similar story in that he grew up in the suburbs of St. Paul and met me, and I dragged him out to the farm, and here we are. We bought our farm in spring of 2015, and so this is our 2020 is going to be our sixth season on our farm, and with our sixth group of pasture pigs. I just want to show this slide because this is a completely unsolicited advice for me, and you all, it seems like you're all farming and you're landowners, so you probably all know about holistic management and values-based decision making. So again, completely unsolicited advice, but they asked us to give a Farminar, so I'm gonna share what I want to share on it, I guess. We took some time at the beginning of our farming life together, me and Nick, to spend time learning about holistic management. And so I just wanted to share this mind map that we made on coggle.com, which is a really great little website, just about some of the principles and values that we try to follow on our farm. These are aspirational. I mean, if you look at the details, we're not always happy and healthy, but when we're trying to make decisions, we return to this framework and try to check them against this. So for instance, aspirational, farmstead enterprises pay for the mortgage and enterprise specific expenses, or we make time to see our families and socialize with sparkly people. All these things kind of keep us on the path of doing what we want to do, which is to be happy and healthy and not let our egos and our goals that we make for ourselves get in the way of that. So just wanted to share that. It's a cool resource, coggle.com, if you ever want to map out your values and what sort of guides you. So this is a bird's eye view of southeastern Minnesota. I think you guys can see my cursor. So here we are, Nettle Valley Farm. See, we're really close to Iowa. About half an hour from Decorah, about 45 minutes to an hour from La Crosse, and about an hour and 15 minutes from Rochester. So we're in the beautiful driftless area. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the area in northeast Iowa that has the beautiful hills and trout streams. We've got that in southeastern Minnesota too. So this is our farm. We have the weirdest property line in all of Houston County, no joke. So it's the part that's outlined in white. We'll zoom in a little bit. So that's the chunk of land that we bought in 2015. I always like it when people are transparent about their finances, and especially as beginning farmers, it's nice to know and to share how we were able to pull this off when farmland can be so expensive and there's so many barriers to entry. I had enough Schedule F, years of a Schedule F to make an FSA loan for this 67 acres of farmland work. But we still, in the earlier days, relied more heavily on off-farm income, less heavily now that our business is up and running and we're up to finishing 60. We're going to be finishing 60 pigs next year. But just want to be transparent about that. I didn't save up enough money from wholesale vegetable farming to buy this piece of property, but it gave us a good start on it. So that's what we bought in 2015. And now we, not last spring, but the spring before that, our neighbors out of the blue. So we were living on, if you see the cursor, we were living on this piece of farmland in a trailer. And our neighbors here in this homestead in the southwest corner contacted us out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you want to buy our house and our homestead?" So we pulled that off with my husband's off-farm income. And now that really accelerated our goals of wanting to start an incubator farm, because we bought 67 acres of raw land originally, and we added some electricity and some internet to the trailer we lived in, but that was not going to be enough infrastructure to start an incubator farm program. So yeah, now we're up to the homestead site, the 3 acres in the southwest corner, 67 acres of all pasture and woods. Then we do rent about 5 additional acres that we've transitioned from annual cropland into pasture. And we've got wooded hillsides and a black walnut, black walnut and white pine plantation that's right here. So I'll give you a very quick little virtual tour. Oh, first, why livestock, since I used to be a vegetable farmer? Well, on a personal level, I got Lyme disease really badly when I was doing veggies, and that sort of killed my energy level and my drive to be able to do veggie production anymore. But at the same time that I was getting sick, I learned about regenerative agriculture, permaculture, restoration agriculture, and that really sort of set me off on this new path. And so when we looked for land in this area, we wanted to find something that was good for grazing all different kinds of livestock. Also, we want to do livestock because it keeps land in permanent cover. Our farm filters about 600 acres of farmland in the uphill from us. So we kind of think of that as our responsibility to make sure to keep living roots in the ground. That's a picture from our valley from a couple years ago before we had a terrible poison parsnip invasion. So that's what it looked like a couple years ago, but it's still mostly open pasture and woods. There's a shot of our pine plantation and the black walnuts interspersed within there, which is great for silvopasturing our heritage breed hogs. Got some ponds, another pond. And then this is just one of my favorite pictures of our pigs next to our pine plantation. This is my full-time job year-round is farming, and my husband works off the farm, and he helps me out when need be. So mostly this is my enterprise. Last year we finished 50 Hampshire and then Hampshire cross pigs on pasture, and we direct market by the whole and the half, mostly just to families in the area. We feed all certified organic feed, and then no corn and no soy either. So we're trying to really go for that niche market of folks who really, really are willing to pay top dollar for just high quality, super happy hogs. I am not able to see the chat box anymore, so am I missing any questions? Maggie, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute. Nope, you're good right now.
Okay, great. That's our story in a nutshell. Went over that pretty quickly, but yeah, so we'll dig right into the Nettle Valley Farm Incubator program. So on the left here, we've got Bailey Lutz from Listenmore Farm, and Heidi Eger from Radicle Farm. This is our first year all going working on this together, and we got really lucky. It was a really great year, lots of ups and downs, but we made it through together, and you'll hear from Bailey and Heidi more about that. But yeah, so as you heard earlier, Bailey has ducks and goats, and Heidi has sheep and chickens, and livestock of all kinds works the best for us. I think in the future we could potentially have space for some annual vegetable production, but that would be a stretch. So from the very beginning, Nick and I wanted to be really clear about what the Incubator Farm program is and what the Incubator Farm program is not. I'm sure we can all, off the top of our heads, think of several farms that have had this really idealistic vision of, all working together in harmony, and everyone will just sort of chip in when needed. And some of them have worked, probably, but a lot of them, at least ones that I can think of, have ended in blood feuds and lawsuits and a lot of bad feelings. So I think we're at the point in our history where we don't have time for those sorts of situations, and I feel really strongly that I refuse to be another one of those examples where we don't spend enough time on the softer side, the soft skills that go into an incubator farm program. So what we are is a place where we want to support beginning regenerative farmers. We're going to do that we are doing that by providing access to collaborators, to land, to shared equipment, business coaching if they want it, low interest microloans, and joint marketing opportunities for 1 to 3 years. And actually, in the long term, I think we're open to people staying for more than 1 to 3 seasons if things really do work out well. But we wanted to make sure right off the bat that we made it clear that this is not an internship. We're not really set up for, I could potentially teach someone the very basics about pastured pig management, but I don't know anything about, I guess I know a little bit about ducks now. But this is not a place where Nick and I are teaching people about certain types of farming. So it's not an internship. It's certainly not an apprenticeship. It's not a job. We're not hiring folks to be here. It's definitely not a commune, and it's not a worker-owned cooperative. Hannah and Emily of Humble Hands Harvest have a really neat worker-owned cooperative model. But I guess I know myself well enough to know that is not for me. Like, I'd like to be the kind of person who is totally fine with no hierarchy, and I think I'm just a little bit too much of a control freak, even though I wish I wasn't. So I'm just trying to be honest about that, given that we really want this to be a successful program for everybody involved. Trying to be honest about those limitations and boundaries right off the bat. And so why? A lot of folks who are more comfortable with the idea of a nuclear family living in the farmhouse and running everything by themselves, a lot of times they'll just be like, what are you doing? You're opening yourself up to so much risk, and it can be messy. And we thought that through really carefully from the beginning, and there's a lot of great reasons that we feel like this is a good fit for us and something that we feel like it's important to do. First of all, I was incubated, and as I mentioned before, those couple of years that I was in the Incubator Farm program were super crucial in terms of saving money, having access to equipment that I would never have been able to afford on my own, that let me take some of the stress off my body right away in the earlier years, access to the land, just the ability to have people around. So when I made the big dumb mistakes, I had folks who would have my back and could help me out in a pinch. And that's something that was really crucial for my career as a farmer. And so we wanted to make sure to pay that forward. Also, it's a quality of life thing. Nick is a bit of an introvert and I'm an ambivert. I really like alone time, but I also love the just satisfaction of working alongside other people on projects, and just having multiple enterprises happening at one time in a place. And then everyone, especially right now, lives in the farmhouse. And so we have a whole lot of fun cooking for each other and sharing meals and playing games when we have energy, and then watching Netflix shows when we don't have energy, and just having a little bit more of that community feel to it. And I know that's something that's really satisfying for me and Nick. And we feel really lucky to have Heidi and Bailey here. And another one of our not so secret goals and motivations is to have even more cool neighbors. We already have a lot of really amazing, talented, neat farmers in this area, but I think the Driftless is just completely, it's just ready to be, especially in southeastern Minnesota, ready to be just a hotbed of regenerative livestock-based agriculture. And we want to be help get more young farmers who are passionate about that onto land. And overall, we just we think too that nature isn't ever just one thing, and so we're hoping that as the Incubator Farm program develops and we all get better at our individual enterprises, hoping to be able to layer those on top of each other and have some of those synergies with goats following up after pigs, or the chickens following up after the pigs, or just getting some of those synergies going. And so here's more of the nitty gritty on what is this program actually, what do we offer? So don't worry about reading all of this stuff, it's all on our website. But here, I'll run down the list. So we have agreed upon access to infrastructure at the beginning of the year. So at our little homestead, we've got a barn, we've got storage sheds, we've got a hay shed, we've got forest for the goats and the pigs, we've got pasture, we've got that pine plantation, and some sort of tillable ground. It's not the best for tilling, but it is tillable, I suppose. We've got electricity and well water. We've got quite a few tools that I've been collecting. Maybe some would say over collecting, a bit of a hoarding, because it could come in handy sometime. Lots of tools that we share with the incubatees and whenever we can our neighbors, like an earthway seeder, wheel hoe, chainsaws, irrigation equipment, some fencing materials. Not everything is included in the Incubator Farm program. So for instance, we do ask for a mileage reimbursement or an hourly reimbursement for certain things, like the flatbed trailer, there's a reimbursement, or the livestock trailer reimbursement fee for that. We do have a 4-wheel drive truck that the incubatees can use for a mileage reimbursement. Both incubatees can use our little Polaris Ranger to schlep stuff around the farm. That's included. And that's something that Nick and I are actually going to revisit this winter, is reassessing that fee schedule, just to make it a little bit more relaxed, just because we want to make sure that both Heidi and Bailey are able to save up as much as they can for their next enterprise. So something that we have on the list to reassess. We also want to offer basic business support. It's not always necessarily super obvious about how to start an LLC, or should you be an S Corp, or what sorts of free bookkeeping equipment are out there. Nick, in a previous life, was the CEO of a chain of 6 tea shops in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and so he can do all that stuff in his sleep. So we're really lucky to have him on board to help out with all that stuff, because he does that all for the farm too. He does the stuff that I do, the outside stuff, and he does a lot of the inside stuff. So that we're both available to offer counseling in that regard. I've been hoarding tools since I was 19, and I've also been hoarding farming books. So we've got a pretty good library going. Last year we did some kind of casual joint marketing opportunities, because chances are the people who buy my pork will be excited to buy Bailey's ducks or Heidi's chickens. And that seems like a nice way to support each other, and vice versa. We've had some fun farm open houses and some workshops. In a couple weekends, we're going to have a chainsaw safety workshop through the Driftless Grown organization. So that's another thing that incubatees can participate in. Heidi and Bailey also, through their own really super cool on-farm event, roasted one of Heidi's lambs over an open fire. So I had absolutely nothing to do with that. I just got to show up and enjoy it. So that's been another great part of the Incubator Farm program, is getting exposed to other people's passions and interests. We also are willing to offer small, low-interest microloans, and actually, I say $1,000 or less, but depending on the enterprise, we're willing to go above that, either through our savings or through a self-directed IRA. And something that we're excited to be able to do. So sort of patient capital, and then pretty low interest loans. And then wild plants, and then cultivated plants from the land is another thing, surplus that is available to incubatees. And as you can imagine, we had some successes this year, and we had some challenges. So I'll talk about some of the successes that I thought we had. One of the major things that I thought started us off on the right foot was at the beginning of the season, we invited Martha McFarland she's a bison farmer. She's a PFI member too, I believe. She is a trained facilitator, and she came and spent a day with us, just doing sort of, I wouldn't call them icebreaker exercises, but exercises that helped us get really real with each other about our values and some of our expectations. And she helped us make a list of agreements on how we wanted to handle conflict and how we wanted to treat each other. And then some just nitty-gritty things about sharing meals. And I think that was a really, really good way to get the season started, instead of just sort of immediately getting lost in our own jobs and enterprises. It was a nice intention-setting time. And then Martha also served as the point person and the mediator outside of the house. So I kind of call her our pressure release valve. In farms that I've known who have tried this sort of thing, it's usually that there's one person in charge, and they're a very visionary, particular person, but then no one actually has authority to, like, if things go wrong, or if that one main point person sort of has no accountability. That's oftentimes when things go wrong. And I like I said earlier, I refuse to be another, failure of people working together. So we appointed Martha and basically gave her the full authority to if we ever needed for her to contact me or contact Nick, if they had heard from someone inside the Incubator Farm program that, like, hey, this isn't working, we need some outside help. And that's just a valuable system of accountability. But on the other hand of that, at least for me, a clear hierarchy is pretty helpful in terms of, like, this is our farm, we're inviting other people onto our farm. It keeps things from getting too messy. And so for now, that's working for us in terms of feeling like that's an understandable, clear way to be. We also came up with some good systems that supported living and eating and working together. The best system that I can think of is Heidi made us a great Google map for pasture rotations that we all used. The really simple stuff, like coming up with a meal sharing plan, how to keep track of buying various meat from each other's enterprises, because that's something that great thing that we did. You have a built-in market when you have 4 really hungry eaters in a household. So we eat a lot of our pork and Heidi and Bailey's meats as well. Mutual support was such a big success. And Heidi and Bailey will each have a chance to talk about their take on the season and their successes and challenges too. But this picture to the right here is a harvest day where we all pitched in. Heidi's family came, some of Heidi's other friends came, and it just felt so good, and like it was tapping into this amazing tradition of people coming together to support each other on big days, like butchering chickens or planting projects or helping me load pigs or that sort of thing. You know, there's all these things where you can design your enterprise to mostly be a solo task, you know, 90% of the time, but then that's those 10% of the days, or maybe even 5% of the days where you just really need some other hands around. I think another success was the blend of enterprises. Nobody's enterprises overlapped too much, but they're, I think, especially going to the second season, we can do a lot more planning about how our enterprises will find some synergies, which is, I'm really excited about that. I think it helped that none of us were doing the same thing as somebody else, and that nobody else had necessarily a ton of expertise in anybody else's enterprise. So we're all sort of learning on our own, you know, keeping respectful boundaries and like giving other folks at the Incubator Farm program feedback when we could. But it's not like somebody else was on our farm doing pasture pigs in a way that I felt like, oh man, I don't know about this. So that was, especially for this first year, a really good thing. And then, yeah, the casual co-marketing worked out really well too, helping each other sell meat. And I'd like to formalize that and do more of that, and add other farms in the area as well. Because even if other farms in the area aren't part of the Incubator Farm program, I think all of us can agree that it's you know, we're all in this together, and we want to see it, other folks succeed as well. Yeah, so opportunities to improve, but and then some straight up failures. We did have a candidate or an Incubator Farm member that it just did not work out at the beginning, and I won't go into the details of that, but on that, we had to learn quick that we have to, you know, since we are living in such close quarters and we're all farming together, it takes really good communication skills, and really a strong commitment to community life and living, and having a very community oriented way of moving through the world to make it work in a setting like this. And so that was good. It's good to fail right off the bat, and then learn from that. Another thing that didn't work out very well is incubator hours. So the quote unquote payment to be part of the Incubator Farm is we did do 20 hours a month of work trade, essentially. And so that's basically helping me out with anything that's on my homestead list or farm list. And that just ended up being too many hours, I think, for folks for Heidi and Bailey, who are already, you know, working off the farm and working really hard on their own enterprises. And so we're going to revamp that down to maybe, I think, 12 hours a month for this coming season. And I think that'll be a lot better. Hidden expectations. We found out, even though we had this great facilitated session with Martha at the beginning of the season, everybody still came into this with expectations that were so foundational that we didn't even know that we had them. For instance, for me, an Incubator Farm is somewhere where I tell you what I know, and I give you the advice that I have, and then I back off and let you make your own decisions. And that will probably include messing some things up. Whereas Heidi and I had this conversation where it's like, oh, I think, Heidi, I don't think you'll mind if I share this, because I think we've talked about this before, but Heidi had more the idea that an incubator is more like an egg incubator, where it's like safe and protected. And I don't think either one of those is necessarily right, but those are two very, very different styles of hosting an incubator farm. So luckily we were able to talk through a lot of those, and we're clarifying those expectations for next year and for additional incubatees who come on. Kitchen garden just didn't quite happen. Something that we can work on again more next year. More coordinated food preservation, I think, is something that would be really great to do all together, and we just need to make a plan. Formalizing the co-marketing strategy, again, that'll be something that we just need to put some time and energy into. I'd say the second to the last issue here is probably the biggest opportunity to improve. The end of season slump. I think we all got tired and sort of worn out all at the same time. And so at the very moment that I needed to be putting more time and effort into actually managing an incubator program, checking in with Bailey and Heidi, tightening up our systems that were supporting all of us, that's the very moment that I was like, oh my God, I just want to nap, and so I need to make a better plan for how am I going to account for my energy levels when I'm starting to get worn out by the end of the season. And then organizational systems, like it's been alluded to a couple times already. I can be a bit of a tool / equipment / book / other things hoarder. So I still certainly have a lot to work on in terms of organizational systems, because there's just nothing worse than someone coming on the farm and needing to borrow something or use something and not being able to find it. And that just will create a lot more harmony overall, if things are just organized the way they should be. So some next steps in the coming years, we've been sort of toying around with the idea of an on-farm store featuring all the products from the farm enterprises, and maybe farmer friends from the area. We potentially, maybe, have room for one more incubatee. It'd have to be the exact right person with the exact right enterprise or enterprises. Since we're sort of maxed out on open pasture with Heidi's sheep, we have a lot more woodland to graze, maybe a little bit of tillable for something like that, maybe some more micro livestock like rabbits, or maybe a mushroom enterprise. So yeah, as far as the house capacity, we probably have room for maybe one more person, but something that we're not desperate, but if the exact right person came along, we'd consider it. And then just drilling down and improving the systems that we have, communication systems, organizational systems, figuring out how to learn from other incubator programs across the country, and so on. I'll take, before I hand things off to Bailey, are there any questions? It was a pretty quick overview of just the basics of the incubator farm program. Anyone? Let's see, I'm going to try to open up the chat. Oh, nope, oh boy, that didn't work. Maggie, are there any questions?
No, there aren't.
Okay, great. Denise O'Brien, I'm shocked that you don't have any questions yet.
Oh, you do have a question. Steve Carlson asked, maybe I missed it, but I'm curious how all of you met to make this arrangement.
Oh, it's a great question. No, you did not miss it. Different situation for each of us. I'll hand things off to Bailey, and Bailey can tell you about how Bailey was able to connect with us. So I'm actually gonna hand that off. Great question, Steve.
Actually, really quick, we have one other question. Ann Novak asked about liability insurance.
Yep, so we have a great insurance agent in Spring Grove, who we're just really open with him about everything that we're trying to accomplish, and he just works with us on making sure that we're covered. A couple of things that we do require from incubatees is they have to have their own LLC, and they have to have their own liability insurance to make some of those liability lines clearer. And yeah, our farm liability policy is more expensive because of what we're trying to do with the incubator farm program, because I should have made that clear too. It's not a separate nonprofit. It's not a separate business. It's just something that we're running as a part of our farm. So I guess it doesn't work like this in practice, but technically we're a for-profit incubator farm program, which it's hard to find models for that across the country. It's mostly non-profit. Mostly it's produce, and then mostly it's nonprofits or foundations running the incubator farms. Any other questions?
Yeah, Steve Carlson also asked if you do decide to take a third person, he's curious about how and where you'll advertise.
I don't think we will advertise. I think it'll be word of mouth. That's how we met Heidi and Bailey, and I think that will be the way that we'll go moving forward.
And then, do you feel a part of the greater community? Carol B says, I got that you are all happy that you share goals and philosophy, but what is it like in the greater community?
It's a great question. For me, I know that let me start over. I know moving to a small town where you don't have a lot of connections can be really isolating and difficult. I kind of get around that in that my dad and my aunts and uncles grew up here. And even though I didn't grow up here, a lot of folks refer to me as sort of moving back to where our roots are. So in some ways, I got to jump ahead a few years a little bit. I guess it'll depend on who you ask in terms of how much other people look at me as sort of being quote unquote from here. But I think we have started with our values of community is extraordinarily important. We want to be useful to our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. So I think we could have moved here and not made much of an effort to get to know people. But since that's really important to us, honestly, we're Minnesotans. Most people don't come out and exactly say what they think of you one way or the other. A few people do. And we've just had to take that with a grain of salt. But for the most part, at least in my experience, people have been curious about what we're doing. Maybe they think it's a little goofy, like what are those pigs doing out roaming around in the dirt? But I mean, for the most part, we've had a lot of support from our neighbors, especially when we need help. So I've been really grateful for that.
All right, thanks. There aren't any more questions right now, so we can turn it over.
Cool. Here's Bailey.
Great. My name is Bailey Lutz. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I, just like Dayna and Heidi, grew up in the cities. I grew up in a northwestern suburb of Minneapolis, and then lived in Minneapolis for a few years before I jumped into the farming thing. My very first season, I had a work share on a farm that was focused on CSAs and wholesale. So that was about 3 acres of production, all certified organic. And I was out there a day or two a week for the whole season. And prior to that, I didn't have any real experience farming or gardening. I had just managed a greenhouse at the University of Minnesota while I was still a student there. But I was working for a co-op in Minneapolis at that time and knew this farmer through the co-op. And I just wanted to better understand what went into the production of all of the vegetables and herbs that was being sold at the co-op. So yeah, I did a day or two a week the whole season. And something just kind of clicked for me towards the end of the season. It was maybe the last week of October. I was the first one out to the fields, and it was kind of like the first frost, like real, like sparkly frost of the season. And I was there by myself and just got to wander around and just like felt something just like solidify. I don't know, it was something that I hadn't really felt up until that moment. And I like knew that I wanted to keep doing it. And in like those last couple months of the season, I had just been reading a lot more about market farming, and I had read an article in the Land Stewardship Project's newsletter about a farm in Wisconsin that was using livestock to restore the native oak savanna, and that just kind of like blew my mind a little bit because it like wildly contradicted so much of what I thought I knew about raising livestock for meat. So with that, kind of like developing interest in market farming and this like newer perspective or like, I don't know, sparkly thing about livestock, I knew that I wanted to pursue farming full time. Not like operating my own enterprise, but I wanted to pursue it full time. And I knew too that I wanted to see what it would be like to work with livestock. So I had an apprenticeship last year from March through October on a diversified farm with produce and flowers and livestock, pretty much like any species you could think of we had there. And that was a pretty challenging season for a lot of reasons. I was living rurally for the first time. Like I don't think we met any of our neighbors really the entire season, which is so different to what I've experienced this past year and knowing like all of my neighbors now. So it was challenging in that it was so rural, and I had lived in Minneapolis the past few years before that. And it was challenging too in that I'd never lived in community and had never lived as intentionally as we did there. I wouldn't say that, we were like a shining example of living in an intentional community there, but it was so much more than I had experienced before. And so at the end of that season, that's kind of when I met Nick and Dayna, was towards the end of that 2018 season. And they told me about starting their incubator program the coming season. And it was just kind of like perfect timing in that, like, by the end of the season, I knew that like I wanted to keep farming, but didn't really want to work for anyone else. I just have been since like the very beginning of my schooling and since my very first jobs too, like I've always, I don't know, kind of pushed back on my teachers or my supervisors or whoever, just like wanting to like push boundaries a little bit and see what all I can get out of something. But I also too have like found that I've always wanted to do things differently than what I was being asked to do. So that was kind of what drew me initially to the incubator program at Nettle Valley. And then talking to Nick and Dayna more, I really liked the idea of learning by doing while I could still avoid a lot of really scary risks. So like a really great example of that was I had started out this season with the intention of doing about half an acre or so of vegetables, and then my flock of ducks. And I was thankfully like able to abandon the veggie enterprise at the beginning of the season without like having paid land rent or invested in a lot of equipment and infrastructure. So I was able to get out of that. And I've just been thinking a lot about like what would I have been like as a person this year had I not been able to walk away from doing vegetables. Like if I, felt like I had to stay invested in it because I had invested so many dollars into it or whatever. Like I feel like I would be a much less satisfied human had I not had the ability to walk away from it. And then the support system and having a sounding board here has been really great. Again, like being able to abandon the vegetables and like having people to talk to about that. And kind of part of that support system too, also specific to the vegetables, was being connected to other farmers in the area to help support that enterprise. So I was able, through a connection from Dayna, I was able to meet Mike and Katie of River Root, who are going to be directing a Farminar next week. And that's where I was able to start all of my vegetables in their greenhouses. So having those connections too has been really great. And then living and working in community, like Dayna hits on it really hard that we're not a commune, and we definitely are not, but we do care about each other. And something that I've heard so much in the past year is about so many farmers feeling so isolated. And part of that is just like actually not being able to leave the farm because there's no one else who can step in so you can have a break. And you know, there are definitely other facets to that isolation, but I can't imagine doing this kind of stuff by myself. And it's been great to have people to laugh with and to eat really good food with, and know that like if shit hits the fan, like I have someone to back me up. So all those different pieces are what's brought me to Nettle Valley. And some of my motivators and goals for this season and moving forward are kind of characterized by these 3 points. So the first 2 points are kind of more the motivators. The third point is more of a goal. So right livelihood is this concept, maybe not originally from this author, Charles Eisenstein, but I read about it in one of his books, and kind of like it can be kind of summarized in these 2 questions. What opportunity is there to give, and how may I best give of my gifts? And that's made me think about how I can live in a way that's personally sustainable as well as fulfilling. I really love to wholly throw myself into my work, and that can be a really, really terrible thing to do for your health, both physically and mentally. So trying to, I don't know, find this place of sustainability and fulfillment, and also identifying the gifts that are special to myself, that I have to offer both my immediate community and the communities within the region. And I think one of those gifts that I was able to identify this season was like this love I have of kind of like the really gross parts of livestock farming. So like harvest days, so slaughter and butcher, and then also birth. Like those are the 2 like messiest, gnarliest parts of livestock farming. And I love it. And I think that's what's given me this really great motivation to do what I do. And then the second point, ecological kinship, is something that's really like starting to develop for me. I think a lot of farmers, myself included, think of ourselves as stewards, which kind of in my mind like creates this line between human and earth, kind of like gives us this, I don't know, strange responsibility. Whereas like we should maybe be thinking of ourselves as more part of, like more integrally part of an ecosystem in our methods of farming, and less so like a manager of systems. And there's a lot to get into with that. It's definitely a developing idea. But then this third point is some of my goals, which is developing community and a web of support. So with the neighbors in the area, fellow farmers, and customers. And we're getting pretty tight on time, so I'm gonna quickly run through my enterprises. So I have a herd of goats. I chose goats for the opportunity in the meat market and for contract grazing. I also just really love their personalities. I have all of my does are Kikos, which I chose for foraging skills, parasite resistance, and mothering ability. They're just a really, really hardy breed. They're being bred to an alpine buck, which is a really big dairy breed that's also sometimes raised for meat. He's a really sweet boy, so that's how he ended up with me. Goals for this upcoming season, because I've been able to run them through pretty overgrown woods in the valley. I've been able to see firsthand just like what kind of work they can do. So I really want to deepen my knowledge of the plants that I'm trying to target and kind of how I'm impacting those ecosystems. And I want to grow the herd too, so I can have really a greater impact. And then my ducks, chose them for similar reasons to the goats. There's an opportunity in the meat and egg market. There's a lot of demand in wholesale for meat. I also chose heritage breeds just because they're hardier. They kind of have a little more going on in their noggins than a lot of more commercial breeds. And then I would really like this upcoming season to figure out a good pasture planting and rotation to cut down on my feed bill, and also how I can scale up the system in a good way. So I think we should probably just jump into Heidi and then do questions at the very end.
Yeah. Heidi, you good to go?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So my name is Heidi Eger, pronouns she, her, hers, and I run Radicle Heart Farm. And this first slide just sort of gives you sort of my motivation slide, I guess. So I started Radicle Heart Farm a few years ago with my sister. We did a year of vegetable farming. And so when we picked our name, we really wanted it to represent sort of who we were and what our goals were. And so we just really want to be in touch with both like scientific current best practices, but also doing tried and true historical methods and really keeping our ties to the land in that way. So if you want to go to the next slide. Bunch of pictures of my history. So I've been farming last year. 2019 was my 8th season. For 6 of the 7 seasons, I was working for other people. I've done all sorts of farm internships on all sorts of diversified farms, which has been great. It's really working for other people has really helped me figure out what I like and what I don't like in terms of like farm enterprises, but also communal living and sort of like farm management structures and what I'm looking for in a living situation. So I came to the Incubator Farm. I had met, in 2018, I decided that sheep were my thing, and I was madly in love with them. And so I knew that in 2019, I wanted to try having my own sheep. I'd worked on 3 different farms that had sheep and varying scales and management styles. And so I was ready. I knew that I could, deal with minor vet problems and lambing problems. And then I was confident that I could identify when I couldn't deal with it and when I needed to ask for help. And so I felt confident having my own tiny flock. And my goal in 2019, my idea was just to find someone who would rent me some sheep for the summer. I wanted to be able to be in charge of a flock and have all the responsibility and all of the stress, but then be able to step back at the end of the season, give the sheep back and just be like, okay, how did that go? I know that I have a tendency to just sort of dig into things and be like, it's fine, and get tunnel vision and just be like, it's just going to be fine. Just keep pushing. It'll be fine. And so I really wanted to set up 2019 to be able to just step away and be like, okay, wait, you're going to make a conscious decision if this is what you want or not. And so being able to be at the Incubator Farm was great from a like land responsibility perspective, and that I could step away and just be like, okay, I had one season of commitment to you, and we're just going to see how that goes. The other reason I wanted to be part of the Incubator Farm is I'm a very strong extrovert, and so people will make or break a situation for me. And so being in a place where I liked the people, where we had really great communication goals from the beginning, where the fact that we had a facilitator for our first meeting was this really great sign to me that like, this is going to be good. And then just being able to like eat with people and have support at the end of the day. Next slide. So this is my overview slide for the 2019 season. I have Katahdin Dorper ewes. So I didn't find anyone who was willing to rent me ewes, but I did find Hannah and Emily from Humble Hands Harvest in Decorah were willing to sell me ewes and then either buy them back or board them for the winter for me. So I have four older ewes and then 2 yearling ewes back with them for the winter. I chose Katahdin Dorpers because they're Katahdin. They're both hair sheep, so they shed. They don't need to be shorn. And then they're also this batch of them in particular has been raised to be fully grass-fed, lamb on pasture with minimal help, and also be parasite resistant. So 2019, I wanted to be stressed, and boy, was I stressed. I picked up the sheep in middle of March, and the first month was super easy, just feeding them hay in the barn. And then my second ewe to lamb had a retained placenta and really bad mastitis. And I didn't communicate very clearly with the vet about what my goals were, and so got some advice that wasn't actually the right advice for me and my management style. And so then the ewe who was ill was given antibiotics, and the better choice would have just been having me take her to the locker because she was, fighting infection in 2 places. And so I got to learn how to give injections of penicillin, and it was just really stressful to sort of know that you'd made a bad call and then, try and fix it and try and make the best out of it. And so it was a really good experience. It was, bad, but I learned a lot, and went through that period of being incredibly stressed, and still am in love with my sheep, and definitely want to continue, and I'm excited for the 2020 season. I also had 2 batches of Freedom Ranger chickens. The first we processed on farm, which I couldn't have done without everyone's help, and also the support of the Incubator Farm. We got a donation from someone to support the Incubator Farm and used it to buy processing equipment. So we have really nice killing cones and knives and a plucker, which is amazing. And then we're using Google Maps to sort of track our pasture. How am I doing on time? Okay, so 2020 goals, I am really excited to sort of dig more into pasture health and grass health, and sort of now that I've been on the land one season, work on doing a better pasture rotation. As Dayna sort of briefly mentioned, the wild parsnip in the valley is pretty insane in spots. And so because of the way I grazed, I wasn't able to access parts of the pasture because I didn't hit the parsnip often enough, and it got huge and scary to walk through, so I didn't walk through it. So I'm excited to do a better job of that. I'm excited to do more community networking, working off farm, and then just diving into my first year of enterprises. I didn't feel like I did a great job of meeting people in the community. We definitely had a support network in the Incubator Farm. We would have people over every Wednesday, different people. And so that was great. And that's why I just want to follow up on some of those connections. And then I'm excited to do more marketing and just be able to put more thought and time into marketing. And to have more sheep. Yay, sheep. So that is my overview. I just wanted a chance to touch on the community question. I think as an observer of how Dayna interacts with the community, I think one of the reasons that our neighbors seem to be, super kind to us is they're kind people, for one. But I think just the culture that Dayna and Nick create on the farm of being really open about who they are and what they're doing and not acting like they know it all, I think has really helped shape how the community responds to us. We had a neighbor who, is amazing and helps with all of our like farm equipment, technical questions, was at the farm the day that I had to like go out and give my sheep penicillin for the first time. And the vet had like talked me through it. And then I tried to watch YouTube videos, but all the YouTube videos are showing like, a sheep in a head gate. I don't own a head gate and I'm just going to, tackle this sheep. So, he sort of he's like kindly laughed at me that I didn't know what I was doing. But Dayna was like, well, will you show her how to do it? Which is something like, I'm pretty shy about not knowing things, and asking for help, and Dayna isn't. And so, we had this really positive interaction where he's like, oh yes, young human, I will help you learn. And I just feel like that's the general culture that Dayna and Nick are developing on the farm, is like, we ask for help and we're not trying to pretend like we know it all, and, really honoring the knowledge of the people in the community, which I think has been really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi and Bailey. We didn't get a chance to ask questions right after Bailey, so if anyone has questions for Heidi or Bailey, this is the time to ask away. Heidi, Bailey, Dayna, do you all see the chat box at this point in time, or do you need me to read off questions and comments still?
I was just able to pull it up. Can you see it on the screen now?
No, it doesn't show up on the screen for the viewers.
So I think we didn't answer Steve's question exactly of how we all connected. I connected with Heidi via a Moses field day at Hoke Orchards, and I also had known Heidi's sister, Andrea, up in the Twin Cities, and then Bailey was working with one of my first ever employees way back in the investor farm days of vegetable farming, and he gave Bailey the tip to follow us on Instagram and connect.
Yep.
So that's how the three of us was connected. Let's see. Denise says you've been so clear that I have no questions yet. Oh, that's right. I was teasing you. Trying to process how this fits with our farm. Your information is excellent. Oh, great. We want this to be helpful, and please ask specifics about how it would work on your farm or that sort of thing. In answer to Carol B's question, what greater community? Okay, so great. I'll let folks read some of that. Bailey, I'm really impressed about how you have thought through your plan. I love hearing about your love for the land and how committed you are to your farming venture.
Oh, that warms my little heart. It's just been amazing to find a life like this growing up in the suburbs where all you see are little boxes, and to find sparkly people like Dayna and Nick and Heidi and our neighbors and everyone in the Driftless.
Yeah, it's been a really rich experience. And this is Dayna. I'll chime in with what, I'll add to what Heidi said about us trying to be, not know. I can't help it because we just don't know all that much about us. I always say most of our farmer neighbors knew more about farming by the time they were 9 than I will ever know about farming. And that's just the way it is. And that's a great gift. So I also am realizing that we bring gifts to this community too. We bring new ideas. We bring energy. We bring young person millennial computer skills. One of my sheep farmer neighbors was just over earlier, and I was able to help her out with some computer, like Google Doc stuff. So it's like, we all help each other, which is really, really satisfying. Let's see. Ann Novak wants to know, how is your profit margin this first year? Wonderful network. So I think that question's for Heidi and Bailey.
I can say for myself, the goats have not made me any money yet. They likely will not until, probably the third season. Might just be a break even at that point too. Ducks, so I had two different flocks this season, one of which was split into an egg-laying flock, and then the rest from that flock were harvested, and then the second batch of ducks I had were all harvested. So I'm still feeding ducks that aren't laying eggs. So the meat ducks, I just covered my feed bill and then processing expenses for the second batch, since that was a wholesale account that purchased them. So I just covered those expenses, but that doesn't include any of my labor or the labor of everyone at the farm who helped with the first harvest from that first batch of ducks. So, Heidi, I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably in a similar, oh dear, and I've lost there it is. I lost the chat box. Probably similar. I'm a little embarrassed that I can't just, rattle off numbers. The chickens was a similar thing. I made enough so I charged $5 a pound harvested weight, and I made enough between both batches to cover expenses. The batch that we processed on farm, if I don't include labor, would have made some money. And then the second batch, because I took them to K&B Poultry, they would have, with transportation costs, I lost money on them, even at $5 a pound, which it was sort of what I was expecting. But I just wanted to experience both methods of harvesting. And so taking them to K&B was not a great experience. And so now I'm trying to think okay, if I do chickens again, how do I sort of deal with the fact that I need to ask for help to make this enterprise make any money? And so then I'm relying on the free labor of other people, which feels strange. And I think if it's an educational opportunity for people where I teach them how to do parts of the harvesting I know, and then if it's a training opportunity versus my business model relies on free labor, it's a little complicated.
Yeah.
And then
there was also a question about, are the goats CAE negative tested, from Kathy Rose?
Yeah, Kathy. The folks that I got my girls from are Glenn and Phyllis Kurz down in Iowa. They're really phenomenal people. They had this whole lovely packet that they gave me detailing pretty much everything I could ever want to know about the history of the goats. So yeah, I haven't tested them myself, but when they were still with the breeders, they were tested.
Could you just briefly explain what CAE is?
It's a viral disease. This is one of those things where I constantly have to refer to Google because I just haven't been exposed to it enough
Sure.
to really internalize it. But it's and I don't even really know off the top of my head what the symptoms of it are, but it's a viral disease, and
having to deal with it.
Yes.
Okay, we got HIV virus.
Good to know.
Thanks, Kathy. Oh yeah, Kathy's chiming in and saying CAE is the HIV virus. Let's see. Steve is saying, how often do you have strategy meetings together? Set goals, take a pulse on each operation? That is a great question. Not often enough. We started off the year with weekly check-ins where I would check in, sit down with Bailey, and then sit down with Heidi and sort of ask like, what's going well? What's not going well? What can we do better? And like I mentioned, that end of season slump, when that sort of hit, I think things got a little bit more informal, and I sort of let that slide a little bit. And this coming year, I think we're gonna really double down on the schedule of check-ins, and then maybe have some sort of circular check-in system too, where, you know, I check in with Heidi and Heidi checks in with Bailey and Bailey checks in with Nick, and, you know, sort of around, and then have more of a, say like a Monday night meeting of the minds, or like everybody fills everyone else in on like what's going on in your life, what's going on in your enterprises, what's coming up, just so we can all be on the same page with when everyone needs to use the trailer. And, you know, just to, things get busy, we need to sort of be in tune with each other, since our enterprises can overlap so much. So I think this year I would, especially with Martha, if she's willing, I'd like to have a beginning of the season check in and set intentions, set goals, and then maybe more of a mid-season sort of halfway point check in with Martha, the facilitator, and then have a end of season wrap up. That's a really good thing that we did at the end of this season too. So we had the beginning of the year and the end of the year evenings or days with Martha, but I think having another one of those. And then also really sticking, me as the manager, I need to be more intentional about managing and actually and facilitating those weekly check-ins and sticking more to a schedule. I hope that answered your question.
We all have dinner together most nights, and we have a shared Google Calendar where we're like trying to capture some of those things. So yeah, in the sort of like less people intensive method, that's sort of just what we've done. If that makes sense.
And I think I don't want to, it's been a really amazing, it wasn't a really amazing year. And I think it's gonna be another amazing year. It's hard for me to imagine our farm without the Incubator Farm program, but I don't want to gloss over it and let everyone think that it was just all sunshines and kumbayas and roses. You know, we had disagreements, we stepped on each other's toes, we had misunderstandings, but I think that the commitment at the beginning of the season to engage respectfully in conflict and you know, proceed with care and compassion really made a big difference. And I think we got lucky too, because, you know, Nick and I are committed to making this work, and Heidi and Bailey are both very community-oriented, communicative people too. But this whole thing is not an endeavor, like if you've ever been described as really difficult to communicate with, or well, I don't know, I guess I'm a difficult person sometimes too, but I know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd be very aware of your shortcomings if you are a farmer and you want to try to start a program like this. I don't think it's for everybody. I'm not saying that we're not extraordinary people by any means, but I think Nick and I are both really aware of our shortcomings and are willing to work on them. And so I want to put that word of caution out there. I think every county needs it. You know, every township needs some sort of incubator farm program. We need more of these, but before just diving in, definitely get in touch with us. I think I'll speak for myself and say that I'm happy to help anyone think through whether or not this could be a good fit for you. There are plenty of other models out there as well that help beginning farmers too. And I would love to say that, so both Heidi and Bailey haven't mentioned this yet, but at some point, you know, they're going to be looking for their own farm. So if you know anybody in southeastern Minnesota and northeast Iowa who have, you know, want to make dreams come true for beginning farmers like Heidi and Bailey, definitely keep Heidi and Bailey in mind, because they're amazing farmers who are really dedicated to partnership with the land and taking care of their livestock. So I wanna toot their horns on this Farminar.
Thank you.
Well, unless there are any other lingering questions out there, attendees, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Last call, everyone, for questions if you have anything. And as Dayna just mentioned, she's willing to correspond beyond the Farminar, and Bailey and Heidi have also shared some contact information, so feel free to get a hold of them after the fact. Thank you, all three of you, for being so honest and taking the time to present tonight. And we all are hoping for your success and to see your stories unfold.
Thank you. Please keep in touch.
Thanks.